99 and press enter a couple times again. You do exactly the same thing. So we'll go and undo that. Are you sure? Press enter, complete, and we're back to the way we were before. The next thing is shifting clock. This comes in real handy when you're trying to get a human feel, because not all humans, face it, we don't play directly on the clock time. So a lot of times we're ahead of the beat, a lot of times we're behind the beat, especially if you're talking about a bass guitarist, a drummer, any instrument for that matter. So what we'll do is we'll shift the notes that were played on the bass, instead of being right on the beat, we'll shift them a little bit behind the beat. So he was kind of lagging a little bit. And we'll do that by pressing edit, going to number 8, which is shift clock. The bias, we're going to make it go, I'll do something drastic. I'll make it like plus 14. So that's ahead of, or actually behind the beat, 14 ticks. And then we'll turn off everything else except part number 2, because that's the bass. Press enter. What do you want to actually change, or shift clock, I should say? And we'll say all for status. Press enter again. Are you sure? Press enter again. Complete. And now let's listen. The bass should be playing a little bit out of time behind the beat. Sounds pretty bad, but I did a drastic change. If you did a couple ticks, like maybe just plus 1 or plus 2, you'd get a more human feel if you do that to all of your different instruments. We'll undo and put it back. Press enter again. Complete. It's back to the way it was. Okay. Taking us to the next thing. Under pad number 9, it says data thin. Now, all this basically does is freeze up some of your memory. Let's say that you had a remote keyboard with a pitch bender on it, and you were playing in a part and bending the pitch. Now, each time you move that bender ever so slightly, it sends out a piece of information, an event. And pretty soon, bending it just one way could be like maybe 1,000 different events. And so now you're maybe taxing the whole machine's memory at this point, because you're using a lot of bending or a lot of aftertouch, something like that. So what we want to do is maybe go in and data thin out, and instead of it being 1,000 events for one pitch bend, let's make it only like 500. Cut it in half. Now that means that the bend isn't going to be quite so smooth, but it will go, instead of boom, it's going to go maybe, depending on how much you thin it out. And the way you would do that is you hold down edit, go to data thin, which is number 9, choose what part you want to actually thin out, and then when you arrow over to the right, it'll ask you the status, and you can say everything, but usually you don't want to thin out notes, but maybe control changes, if you rotate the dial, bending, aftertouch, different things like that. So that is how to data thin. The next thing we have is quantize. Remember, we talked about quantize before. Play quantize was the temporary or performance-oriented quantize, which is only while you're playing the pattern, where this quantize in the edit grid is permanent. I liked that shuffle groove that I had going, or that shuffle quantize I had going, so what I want to do is I want to actually make the pattern keep that. So what we have to do is go up to play quantize and choose the shuffle quantize that we had before, which makes the pattern sound like this. Has that kind of swinging feel from side to side. And the way you do that, you go to edit again, go to number 10, which says quantize underneath it. It says edit quantize, select quantize part, and we want everything to be quantized. So we'll press enter. It says, are you sure? Press enter again. And now the quantize in the play quantize goes off because the parts are currently quantized permanently. So now you wouldn't have to have play quantize on. So when you like what the play quantize is doing, then you can edit quantize and it will keep it that way. We'll go back and undo, press enter again, and it goes back the way it was. The last thing on the edit grid is reclock. Now what reclock is going to do, it'll let you do two different things. It'll let you take a pattern and cut it in half as far as its tempo is concerned and the amount of measures, or double it. I'll do both of them to show you what happens. Now remember, our tempo is at 120, and we have a 4-measure pattern right now. And it plays and sounds like this. So if we hold down edit and go to number 11, which is reclock, and the pattern size, we'll make it half on all parts. Choose enter, are you sure? Says complete. Now our tempo is still 120, but our measures are 2 measures. And listen to what happens. Play twice as fast. means you half-timed it. Let's undo. Are you sure? It goes back to the way it was before. Now we'll do double. Edit, reclock again, number 11. We'll change the pattern size to double. Press enter. Are you sure? Press enter again. Complete. Now, we're still at 120, but the measures are 8 measures. Watch what happens now. It plays in basically half time, or by doubling the pattern, puts it in half time. We'll go back and undo. Are you sure? Complete. It's back to the way we were before. That's the edit grid. With microscope editing, we can go in and modify on a per event basis. So let's say you played a bass line and one note was off. Rather than recording the whole thing over again, if you know what note that wrong note needs to be, you can go in and modify that one note. Or maybe one note was too loud, you can change the velocity of it. Maybe you held out one note too long, you can go and change the gate time of it. And I'll show you that right now. What we're going to do is we're going to go in and put in an orchestra hit at the beginning of this pattern on a different part. So the first thing we do is go to a different part, part number 4, move the level all the way up by using the part mixer. We'll go and choose the actual patch. So we'll go to the patch button, choose the category function to the right-hand side. So we'll go through the different categories. And I'll get all the way over to the orchestra hits. There we go. I'll choose number 7, which is orchestra hit number 1. Go back to pattern song. Here's our sound. Okay, now this isn't necessarily going to sound right with the pattern. It'll just be an obvious way that we can go in and see one note happening. Okay, so bear with me. So the first thing we're going to do is to get into actual recording mode with microscope editing. You press record one time, then press it again. Now you are sitting in microscope edit mode. It shows you that there is no event on the screen, so it's time for us to put an event in. First thing we're going to do is insert an event or a note. You go over to the right button on the left-hand side of the front panel, press the right button, it says Insert Event. Then it says Note underneath. If you rotate the value dial, you can choose Program Change or Control Change or Bend or Aftertouch, but we'll choose Note for now. Then you press Enter. It automatically put in a note. If you press Enter repeatedly, you can hear the actual note. Okay, well that's not the note we want, so on the left-hand side of the display it says C4, but what we'll do is we'll change that. So if you cursor over to the C4 and rotate the dial, and we'll go with that one. If you press enter, it moves over to velocity, and we want to do it at full velocity. And then the gate time, you press enter again, it goes to the gate time, and we'll choose, say, 48 for the gate time. And then press stop because you're done recording. Now, when I play it back, you hear the orchestra hit at the beginning. Try it again. Okay, so now we're going to move the event just on a per note basis. We press record 2 times on the same track, the same part, and you can see that there is a D3 at 127 velocity with a gate time of 48, and it shows you in the current display that it's at measure 1, beat 1 at tick 0. So what we want to do is put it on measure 1, beat 2 at tick 0. So it goes 1, 2, and then it'll happen. So what we're going to do is just move it. You're already on that particular event, so hold down Shift, then hold down Edit, hold down both of them together, and rotate the dial. The ticks will change, and you can go all the way up, and once you reach 95, the next tick is going to be measure 1, beat 2, 0. Let go of everything and press stop. Now you've moved it from the first beat to the second beat. Watch what happens. Happens at the second beat. Try it again. That's on the second section. So that's how you actually move an event, by holding down Shift, holding down Edit, and rotating the dial. The next thing we want to do is actually delete an event. So we'll go back and delete that exact event. Press record 2 times to enter microscope mode. It says that there's no event at 1, 1, 0. So we turn the value dial. It finds the very first event that it can find. There it is at 1, 2, 0. We want to delete it. Press edit all by itself. It says delete event. Are you sure? You press enter. It's gone. Now you press stop again. Start from the beginning. There's no more orchestra hit. Once again, to delete an event in microscope mode, press the record button 2 times to enter microscope mode, rotate the value dial to find the event you want to delete, press the edit button, the display will read delete event, are you sure? Press the enter button and then press stop to finish. Since the MC-505 contains the JV1080 synth engine, complete patch editing can be accomplished by using the third edit grid underneath the keypads. Now, although the real-time knobs and sliders can control and modify different patches, complete control over all parameters can be accomplished by using the third edit grid underneath the keypads. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and pick a patch and be in patch mode under display and modify using the actual edit grid underneath the keypads, okay? So first thing you want to do, in display, press patch. We can play the sound. I'm going to category over through the different patch categories, just like we had pattern categories as well. We have patch categories. So we press the category button to the right. You have all basses, stack sounds, pad sounds, all strings, voice ooze, different effects, even into like all piano sounds, different organ sounds, things like vibraphones and marimbas, the guitar sounds, the brass type sounds, other hit sounds, and then into some of the percussion sounds. So we'll go all the way back over to one of the voice sounds. It's called voice ooze. Actually, we'll move back to even further. How about some type of phasing vocal sound? And the reason I chose that one is because just like a JV1080, you have 4 tones that create a patch. So you can have different elements of the sound. Like with a piano, you have the hammer hitting, and then you have the actual sustaining sound. And both of those tones together create the patch called piano. So what we're going to do is we'll choose this particular one because it has 2 different tones. And underneath the part mixer, you have the tone switch area and tone select area. And there are 4 tones that can be made up. This one happens to be using 2. I'll show you the 2 tones right now. First, you need to press the tone select button, and then you can choose your tones. Here's both of them together. If I turn off tone 2, there's 1 tone. Here is the other tone. But together, so you do have kind of a complex sound happening. So once we choose the sound we want, we're going to go in and actually change maybe like waveforms for it. So hold down edit, and since you're in display patch area, then that means the third edit grid becomes accessible. So what we want to do is the first button says wave and frequency cross modulation, so we'll press that one. And this will move us into the wave section, which would allow us to choose different waveforms. So right now we're on tone switches, meaning that we have 2 of the 4 tones on. We'll press the page to the right button, and we can choose from the different wave selections. But right now, let's choose for only 1 of the tones. So we'll turn off one of the tones, we'll go to the tone select buttons, and actually press the first tone select button, meaning show me the waveform for the first tone only. Right now it's called sub-oscillator, and when I play it, you can hear it. If I rotate the value dial, we'll go through different waveforms. There's distorted synth, distorted square, MG triangle, jungle bass. I'll rotate it back to like OB saw, and on up into slap bass. And that's power B fast, and acoustic piano. So I've chosen an acoustic piano sound on just this particular tone of this patch. So now I'll move over to tone select number 2, turn on tone select number 2. So now I have this complex sound, and this one is a formant type of waveform, and I'll rotate the dial and change that to something else. It's actually a waveform that says kick it. Now let's turn off the first tone. It's a kind of a synthesized kick it. And we'll turn the other tone back on with it. Now, we've got a couple different waveforms happening. Let's move on to some of the other things. We'll change the actual filter, kind of the cutoff and resonance thing we did with the real-time controls, but doing it from the edit grid as well. We'll go back and hold down edit, and go to number 4 because it says filter underneath it. And we have the different types. We'll change, well, actually we'll do this for the entire patch, so both tones. So you go to the tone select buttons, hold down tone select number 1, and while holding it down, press tone select number 2. Both will light up, one will blink, but it shows you that both have been selected. So now when I turn the dial, it'll affect both tones, not just one. So right now, we'll go with peaking, then we'll page over to the cutoff, and we'll page over a couple times to the resonance. So quite different from what we started with, but let's say we like that one. We've changed a few different things about it and we like it. We want to go on further. Let's go and add some LFO to it. So LFO is key number 9. Hold down edit and press number 9. And it shows you that we're using a triangle waveform. We'll page over. The rate is 45. We'll increase that to about 99. Page over again. And let's go to the actual depth. We'll move over to pitch depth. See how it adjusts the pitch as well. So we have some crazy sound happening now, and let's save it. Why not? Press the patch button again. It shows you that you have still the same name of the patch, but it shows a little asterisk in the upper right-hand corner next to the patch location, showing you that you have gone in and modified a current patch. If you want to save it, you have to make sure that that asterisk goes away, and that's what you do by saving it. So let's go and save this actual patch. We'll save it into either the user location or the card location, and I'll show you that right now. Press the right button. It will show you patch right at the very top of the display, and it'll show you the location on the right-hand side, and it says UA67. Now, if I want to put it on the card rather than in the user bank, I can simply go to the bank buttons, which is preset, user, and card, and press the card button. It'll say CA067, which meaning it's going on the card. So I'll put it actually back in the user bank. But remember what we did before. If we're going to save something, we may be writing over something that's already currently there. And yes, in the user bank, there are a bunch of patches already there. Some you may already like, some you may have already saved. So how did we go back and see what was in that location? We went to the undo redo button, we pressed it, and we can see, oh, well, it's the same exact patch. Not only can you see what tone you're going to write over, but you can also hear it by playing the keypads. So that's fine, I can save it there. So I'll press undo redo again to go back to the name. We can actually change the name by using the page buttons, and we'll call this one the same name, but I'll just change the first letter from a P to an S, and then press enter. It says, are you sure? Press enter again. Processing, keep power on. It says complete, and now you're done, and here's your new patch. There's a big difference between patch editing and rhythm set editing. If you're editing a patch, you affect the entire key range of notes. So if you have a bass guitar patch and you change the filter, all of the notes of that patch are going to be affected. But when you're dealing with a rhythm set, you have a different instrument on each individual key. So if you want to change the filter for just the snare drum, you have to be precise in saying just this particular key I want to change the filter on. And I'll show you how to do that right now. Press Part Select, then press Part R for rhythm, and you should have all of the rhythm sounds across the keyboard. The next thing you want to do is choose the actual sound you're going to want to play. So we're going to choose pad number 5, that's the clap sound. We'll go into the display area and press patch, and it shows you that we're using the rhythm set TR909, which is P01. The next thing you want to do is hold down edit and press number 16, which is rhythm tone. This is a very key thing to do because now it breaks it down on a per key basis. So right now we'll go in and press the key that we want to edit, which is number 5, and it shows that that's MIDI note number 51, and it is D#3, which is basically what we did push. We want to change the waveform of it, so we'll hold down edit and go to number 1, which is waveform. And then we'll page to the right one time, and it shows us on here that we've got the TR909 clap number 1 on D#3. That's what we're hearing. If you rotate the value dial, you can change it. And we'll choose one called down clap. So now we have a different sound there. Let's go and change something else about it. Let's say that we're trying to do a hip-hop song and we require a different pitch of that clap. So we can hold down Edit and go to where it says pitch, which is keypad number 2. It shows that our pitch is at 0 for the key D-sharp 3. And so now we rotate the value dial. And we'll choose -12. If we want to change anything else about it, maybe some of the filter, we can go to Edit, go find the filter, which is number 4, and we'll page over to Cutoff. We've made a huge mess of this clap sound, but that's what we wanted. So, you can do this on each and every individual note, and then we can save it. And the way you save it, just like we did before, we went back to Patch, we went to Write, we're at user number 1, and do we want to write over something that was already there? Let's check. Press Undo, it shows that something else was already there, so we'll rotate the dial and choose one that we can feel good about writing over the top of, and we'll choose, number 12. Press Undo, Redo again, press Enter, it says, are you sure? Press Enter again. It says Complete, and now you just got done changing a drum sound. The MC-505 has 6 mono or 3 stereo outputs. To send a patch out one of the outputs, use the following procedure. Press the part select button and then press the part number that you want. We'll choose number 2, which is a bass sound. Go into the display section and choose tempo mixer. And then in the part mixer section, press the function button on the left-hand side repeatedly until EFX/out is selected. On the screen, it'll say on the right-hand side, P2 equals dry, or EFX, or DIR1, or DIR2, showing you what output it's currently going to. If you would like to change that, use the following. Hold down Shift and move the part slider for that part. It will go from a D for dry to an E for EFX, meaning go out the mix outputs just like dry, but use the insert effect. Or, if you move it up a little higher, it says DIR1, which means go out direct 1. If you move it a little higher, it goes to DIR2, going out direct 2. Since it's just a bass sound, you may want to send it out just one side of the direct 2 or direct 1 or mix outputs. To do so, you need to pan the sound. Go into the part mixer again and press the function button again until you see pan is lit. And at that point, hard left or hard right will send it all the way out one side or all the way out the other. When you're directing one patch out one output, if it's using multiple tones, make sure all the tones are panned dead center. If you have reverb or chorus, or reverb or delay, or any of effects for that matter, on the sound, it'll always be in stereo. So if you want it to go out just one side, make sure there are no effects on it. So turn off all reverb, all chorus, all delay, any of the insert effects, and it'll go out that one side instead of both. Assigning multiple outputs to a rhythm set is a little different. I'll show you how to do that as well. Here's what we do. Go to Part Select, and then go to Part Select R for the rhythm set. Go to Tempo Mixer in the display area. Go to the Part Mixer again and choose the function button on the left-hand side. Press it repeatedly until you see EFX/out, just like before. When you go to move the actual slider by holding down the Shift button and moving the slider, you're going to get a different option this time. Hold down Shift, you can choose from Dry, EFX, Direct 1, Direct 2, and then at the very top you have RHY, means rhythm. So in the rhythm set, look at each individual instrument and go where they want to go. Now to tell them where they want to go, here's how you do it. In the display area, press the patch button again. Hold down the Edit button and press number 16 for rhythm tone. At that point, press the page right button 2 times and the screen reads Effects/out. It shows you the key on the lower left-hand corner and then the status on the right-hand corner. So then you can say, okay, well, I want the clap sound, which is D#3, and then rotate the dial from dry to EFX to direct 1 or direct 2. Choose whichever one you want for there, press another key, rotate the dial again for that particular key. And then the machine will route it wherever you told it to go on a per instrument basis rather than the entire rhythm set going to one location. Even if you're going to modify just an output of a patch or a rhythm set, you still need to save it by using the right procedure. Pattern call allows you to retrieve your favorite patterns by pressing the keypads. Pattern call configurations can be saved as one of 30 pattern sets. Here's how you do it. In the display section, you press the pattern set button to choose from the 30 different pattern sets. Now, I happen to have, for this demonstration, 2 custom pattern sets called Variety 1 and Variety 2. They're just ones I made up, but you can name yours whatever you like. I'll push pattern call in the keyboard pad area on the lower left corner, and then by pressing keypad number 1, it calls up U103, which is Slow Jam 1, and here it is. Stop that, press number 2, it calls up U108, which is Slow Jam 2. All I did was press a different keypad, that's it. Now, by choosing a different pattern set, I go to Display, press Pattern Set, rotate the value dial and choose Variety 2, which is stored at User 02, go back to Pattern Song, press the same key number 1 again, and it calls up Hip Hop Soul number 3, which is P180. And by pressing keypad number 2, it calls up P179, which happens to be Hip Hop Soul number 2. So if I want to assign a pattern that I like to one of these pattern sets, first I call up the pattern set that I want by pressing the pattern set button under Display, go back to the pattern song button in Display, call up the pattern that I want. So I'll choose Cha-Cha, which is P245, and I'd like to save that to key number 3. The way you assign it is hold down pattern call and press the key you would like to assign it to. It says complete, and now you're done. When I call up number 3, there's Cha-Cha for me. Just like a patch, when you've modified it, it puts the little asterisk next to the name. So if you press under Display the pattern set button, Variety 2 now has an asterisk U02, meaning you've modified it. So if you need to save it, here's how you do it. You press the right button, just like before. Make sure that the location is where you want to save it, which is U02. It's called Variety 2, and you press Enter. It says, are you sure? You press Enter again. It's that simple. There's also RPS, or real-time phrase sequencing. It's perfect for basically any style of music. What it does is it lets you take a part of a pattern, like maybe the rhythm part or the bass part or something like that, and trigger it by pressing just one key. Kind of like a sampler would, except you're not triggering a sample, you're triggering a part of a pattern. And the way you go about doing it is very simple to do. You have 60 different RPS sets. You have 16 pads across the bottom, and so you have 16 different areas you can assign to these pads. And they can be from different patterns, different parts from different patterns. It's really easy to do. The first thing you want to do is go to the display section and press RPS set. Like I said, you have 60 to choose from here, and we'll choose like number U07, which is called the rave set. Go back to pattern song and turn on the RPS, which is in the bottom left-hand corner under keyboard pad. Now, by pressing one of the pads, there's the drum part from one pattern. Here's a drum part from another pattern. Here's the bass part from another pattern. And add some snare. They're all in the same tempo as well. So they're really easy to play. Now, if you're not the greatest player in the world, and maybe you're not going to hit it right on the mark, there is something called RPS Trigger Quantize, which is kind of nice as well. If you hold down Shift and then move over to Sequencer, which is number 11, and press the number 11 button, then use the page to the right button a couple times, you can see RPS Trigger Quantize. You have a couple choices here. You have 16th notes, 8th notes, quarter notes, real, which is exactly when you play it, it starts playing, or measure, or MES for measure. What that means is when you have it set to measure, when the next measure comes in, that's when your RPS is going to start to play. So you can play it a little before that measure starts. It won't play until the next measure comes in. So you're guaranteed to be right on the money every time you use an RPS set. I'll set mine to 16th notes, so I can play and be right before the next 16th note, it'll pick it up and start playing it. Okay? So we'll exit out of there by pressing exit. And so now I can play. Now if I choose a pattern that has maybe a drum sound in it, let's play this one. Its tempo is 132. That means everything in the RPS is going to be at 132 as well. It's playing right along with the pattern that I have playing. There's also a hold button. To assign a part of a pattern to an RPS key, use the following procedure. Find the pattern that you would like to grab the part from. Mute everything else out except for that particular part. So I'll mute everything else except part number 2 because I'm going to take the bass of this particular pattern. Hold down the RPS key and press the key you would like to assign it to. There's one there. I'll also take a synth sound or a synth part from this same pattern. So mute out the bass, unmute the synth, hold down RPS, and assign it to key number 4. Then I'll go to a different pattern and grab just the drums from there. So rotate the data dial to the left, mute out everything except the drums, hold down RPS, and assign it to key number 5. Now, everything is in there. I'll play them back for you. Here was the drums I got back. Here's the bass. And here's the synth part. So now you can play them together. Now, you have to save it, right? Because you have made a modification to an RPS set. So you go back to the display area, press RPS set. You'll see that there is an asterisk next to U07. Maybe we'd like to save it to U01. So you press the right button, just like before. Rotate the dial until it says U01. You can change the name if you want by pressing the page buttons. When you're done, press enter. It says, "Are you sure?" Press enter again. Processing, keep power on. Then it'll say complete. And now you're done. Go back to pattern song. The mute control track will allow you to automate mutes and change tempo on a per pattern basis. So if you have a pattern, you can speed it up or slow it down while the pattern's playing just by putting in tempo changes. Okay? Here's how you do it. Let's say we chose a pattern, and I know you're probably sick and tired of this pattern, but you know, this is just what we've been creating. So we'll enter microscope mode, just like we did before, by pressing record twice. So 1, then 2. Then go over to the mute control track button, which is just to the left of the R button, and press it 1 time. It'll probably say no event because you don't have any type of event on that track already. Just like in microscope editing before, if we want to insert an event, we press the right button. And it says insert event, and it lets you choose what type of event you want. We'll move the value dial until it says tempo. Now, right now, it's going to be at measure 1, beat 1, clock tick 0. So that's fine, we'll do that. We'll press enter. It'll say the tempo changed, and it says the value. Right now it's at 120. We want to make it go up a little higher than that. So we'll hold down shift, turn the knob, and we'll change it to, let's go to 135, and then press enter, and then press stop. So now we have a tempo change. It's right at the beginning though. We need to go back and move it a little bit later because we want it to start off at 120 and then about halfway through speed up to 135. Here's how we do it. You go back into microscope editing mode by pressing record twice. 1, 2. Go over to the mute control track again, press it. You'll see the tempo change on the screen, and we need to move it. So just like we did before, hold down shift, then hold down Edit, so you're holding both down at the same time, rotate the value dial, and that will switch it to a different location. So let's put it all the way up at 1, 3, 11. Let go, press stop. So now when we play the song, it starts off at 120, and it immediately went to 135. Try it again. We'll go back and choose the same thing again. Goes back at 120, and you can even watch the screen. Goes right up to 135. When it curls back around, it'll stay at 135. If you wanted it to go back down to 120, you would have to put in another tempo change at the very beginning so it would go back down to 120. Putting it in exactly the same way, though. One other thing you can do with the mute control track is automate mutes. So let's say in the middle of our pattern, we'd like the bass just to be muted for a little bit. Here's how we're going to go about doing that. The bass is on part number 2, and that's okay, we can keep part number 2, but we're going to do this on the mute control track. Go back into Microscope editing. We'll press record twice. We'll go back over to the mute control track and press it. We'll insert a new event. We'll press right, and instead of a tempo, we want it to say mute. Then press enter. Now it's going to say mute and the part that we're going to mute. And right now it says R, but we're going to change that because I want it to say P2 for the track that the bass is on. And then it says value equals off. That means that when it's set to off, it's muted. And when it's set to on, then it's back on and playing. So we want an off for right now, but we need to move it. So we'll hold down Shift, hold down Edit, rotate the dial, and we'll put this at measure number 2. I'll turn it a little bit faster. Measure number 2, right at beat number 2. And then press stop. And now, when we press play, the bass is gone. When it comes back around, it's still gone. It never got a turn back on or an unmute event. So we need to go put that one in there as well. Let's go to a little bit further in the song, or in the pattern, and I'll put in an unmute event. So we'll go to record 2 times again, back to mute control, and we'll even turn the dial and move to the first event. We can see a tempo change at 1-3-11. We can turn it again, and at 2-2-0 we have a mute. So let's make another one by pressing right. The insert event is mute. Press enter. We'll change the part again so it says P2. And this time we'll page over and change the off to on. Now we need to move it down a little further in the pattern itself so it comes back on. So hold down Shift, hold down Edit as well, rotate the dial, and we'll go to measure number 3, and about the third beat of measure number 3. There we go. Press stop. Now, when we play this, you should hear the bass for a little bit, then it'll cut out, and then the bass will come back in, and then it'll loop back around again. Bass is out right now because it's still muted. There comes the bass again. It's playing, it'll cut out. Now we'll come back in, and loop around again. Just like that. Okay, let's say you've created a bunch of patterns and now you want to link them together to make a song. It's real easy to do, and I'll show you how to do that. Go underneath the D-Beam controller and press the mode button 1 time until you're in the song mode, and you'll know that because it'll say song after one of the titles. We have to call up the actual patterns that we want within the song, and here's how you do it. You go into record by pressing the record button, and then call up the pattern that you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the page button to the right for the different categories, and I'm going to go over to Hip Hop East, which is P133. To enter that in to step number 1, press enter. Your current display changes to 2, so now it's waiting for the second pattern. And I'll change the dial real quick and choose Hip Hop East number 2 and press enter again. Then I'll just choose the same one again and press enter again. Now at step number 4, I'm going to go to Hip Hop East number 3 and press enter. So now I've put in a few different patterns. You know, in one location it was the same pattern 2 times in a row, and then we'll go through and see how it plays. Just press stop, and then press play. There's the first pattern. Here comes the second pattern. Here comes the third pattern, which happens to be the same thing. Here comes the fourth pattern. Very easy to do. Now, you do have an asterisk to the right-hand side of the location of this particular song. So that means, just like before, you've done something to it, you need to save it. So, just like saving before, you press the right button, choose the location with the value dial, press enter a couple times, and you're on your way. Now, there is a little tip I do want to give you. If you want to choose one pattern that has a bunch of different parts in it, and then put it in over and over again into your song, you can also go through and determine the mute settings on each level or at each step of that song. And I'll show you how to do that as well. We're back in the same song. We'll go to record, just like before. We'll choose a different pattern that we have. I'll go to Psytrance number 2. And the way the mute is set up right now, everything is on except for 4, 5, and 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, well that's fine for the first one, press enter. So I'm going to use the same exact pattern, but this time I'm going to mute everything except just R and 2, and then press enter. And then after that, the next step, I'm going to mute out the drums. So I have just number 2 playing, press enter. Then I'll go back and I'll turn off number 2 and put on just 4, 5, 6, and 7, and press enter. And then the last one, I'll go back and I'll turn everything on except for 5 and 7, and press enter. Then press stop. Now when you go back to play the song, you can look at the mute settings and watch how they will stay with what you told it to do at that particular step in the song. So here we go. 4, 5, and 7 are muted. Switch again. Now just R and 2 are playing. Everything else is muted. Next thing, just number 2 is playing because I muted the drums. Bring it all back in. 4, 5, 6, and 7 are playing. Everything else went out. And now, 5 and 7 will be muted. Everything else is playing. The Smart Media 4 card allows you to have 512 extra patches, 20 more rhythm sets, 200 more user patterns, and adds 480,000 notes to the sequencer. All that on a card about the size of a silver dollar. There are 4 different utility procedures you can go through with a Smart Media card. We'll pop that into the machine. Hold down Shift and press the number 15 keypad, which is Card. You have Format, User Backup, Backup Load, and Backup Delete. Formatting is pretty obvious. You need to format the card so the machine can recognize that card so it can save the information to the card. And all you do is when you go over to Format, you press Enter twice and you're on your way. If you page to the right, you have User Backup, meaning take everything that is in my user setup, my user patterns, my user rhythm sets, and my user patches, and put them as a backup on the card. And you do that by pressing Enter twice as well. Paging to the right again, Backup Load. Once you have backed something up to the card, you want to load it back into the machine. Choose Backup Load, press Enter twice, you're on your way. The last one is Backup Delete. I want to delete the backup that's currently on the card. Same thing, press Enter twice, you're done. You may want to use your 505 with the rest of your MIDI studio. Now whether it's a master controlling other devices or a slave being controlled like maybe by a keyboard or a sequencer, the 505 can easily adapt. Now let's say you prefer playing from a MIDI keyboard, like say you have an XP60 or an 80 or a PC200 Mark II. It can easily just play the sounds of the MC-505. You connect a MIDI out cord from the keyboard to the MIDI in on the MC-505. Then, depending on what MIDI channel you're transmitting on, that's what part is going to play. The way the MIDI channels line up on the 505 is this. The R part, or the rhythm part, is on MIDI channel 10. 1 is on 1, 2 is on 2, 3 is on 3, and so on. But you can change that using the remote keyboard in. So if you hold down Shift and press number 12, the first thing says Remote Keyboard. Turn that on and press Exit. It says Processing, Keep Power On. Now, it doesn't matter what MIDI channel you're transmitting on from your keyboard. It just matters what part you select. So like right now, this is transmitting on 1, but I have R pushed. And I'm playing all the drum sounds. When I go to number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, you can also use your MC-505 to trigger external MIDI devices as well. We have an SP-808 sampler over here, and it's set to receive on MIDI channel number 1. We've connected the MIDI out from the 505 to the MIDI in of the 808, and we've gone over and pressed part select, and then gone to part number 1. Since that's on MIDI channel 1, we want to transmit on MIDI channel 1 from the 505. By holding down Shift and pressing number 12 for MIDI, and then paging over to MIDI local TX, you can choose from 3 different things. You have a B for both, an I for internal, and an E for external. What this means is your keys now are going to play an internal sound, an external sound, meaning the sampler, or both. So in this situation, we want just an external sound, so you would choose E for external. Then press exit, processing. Once it's done, then you can play the keys on the front panel of the 505 and trigger the samples over here. So let's say we've got to number 6. Happens to be a beat loop. And what I want to do is I want it to play, it happens to be the same BPM as well. I have a pattern that's 130, and the sample is 130. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Microscope mode and create an event, or a note, just like we did before, to trigger that sample. Go into Microscope editing, press record twice, just like we did before. Make sure you're on part number 1, because that's where we're going to put it. And to insert an event, we're going to do just like we did in Microscope editing. You press the right button. It says insert event note. We say, yeah, that's what we want. Press enter. It says C4, but this particular pad triggers on E3. So we'll rotate the dial until we're at E3 with a velocity of 127. So we'll just go full velocity. And then there's the gate time. Now, when you're doing beat loops, this one happens to be a 1 measure sample. So what we want to do is have it play 1 measure, then have it repeat itself again, and have it repeat itself again, and so on. So the way the pulse per quarter note works inside the MC-505, this has 96 pulses per quarter note. You know how you have the beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, but you also have the 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. Those are the pulses per quarter note, or the individual areas that you can break down in between the regular quarter notes of a measure. This has 96, so if you do that times 4, it's going to be 384 for 1 whole measure. What we want to have happen is start playing at the beginning, and then play all the way until 1 tick before it needs to start at the next measure. So that means 384 is 1 whole measure, so we want it to go 383. So I'll change the gate time to 383. Here we go. Right there. And then press stop. The next thing we want to do is change the sequence out parameter, because we only want track number 1 to play an external device rather than an internal device, or just both. So what we'll do is hold down Shift and press pad number 8 for sequence out. It'll show you what each one of the different tracks are playing, whether it's both internal or external. So we have part number 1, and we want that to be external, and then press exit. So now it should play just 1 measure, and then the other measures would be blank, at least for the sample. It plays for 1, and then it stops playing. So rather than inserting 4 different events, why don't we just take the first one and copy it 3 times? So let's do that by holding down Edit and pressing number 1 for copy, making sure only number 1 has been selected, and we want from measure 1 for only 1 measure. Page over, that's fine. Page over again. Destination is the temp pattern, that's fine. Page over again, the destination measure. We want to take measure 1, copy it for 1 measure, and start it at measure 2. So we'll change that to measure 2. Cursor over again, status will be all, that's fine. Page over again, mode replace or mix. We can do replace, there was nothing on measure 2 anyways on this track. And then how many times? We want it to do 3 times. So then we've taken one measure, copied it to 2, and repeated it 2 more times after that. So that's a total of 3 times. Page over again. Are you sure? Enter for complete. And now it should play all the way through. Loop around. And there you go. You've synced an external sample with the actual pattern. So now I've got a pattern on my MC-505. I also have a sequence inside my software sequencer, and I'm going to make the sequencer start and stop the MC-505. First thing I need to do is hold down Shift, go over to pad number 11, which is sequencer, change the sync mode to slave, then press exit, and that'll be processing. Bring out my keyboard over here. Once that gets ready, by the way, the pattern was at 123 BPM. The sequencer is at 130 BPM, so this will be a little faster than the normal pattern was. So when I press play on the sequencer, press stop, rewind it, press it again, it starts right at the beginning. It can continue, or go back to the top of the song. All you have to make sure is that your software sequencer is transmitting start and stop and continue messages. Now that we've synced the clock of the 505 to our external sequencer, I'd like to actually record a pattern from the 505 into the sequencer for, future modifications. So what we've done is I've already gone through and taken the drums and the bass and recorded them in there. But now it's time to do the third part. First thing I need to do is unmute the third part. I only want one part to be recorded into this track. So that's what I did, unmute the third part. The first thing I'm going to do is select the proper channel. So that's MIDI channel 3. Then I'm going to choose the proper port. And now I'll even go over and choose the bank and the patch from the computer. The bank is preset B. The patch is DOC stack. And there we go. Okay, now I'm going to mute the other 2 tracks and select the track I want to record on. And here we go. Unmute those 2 tracks and play the whole thing back. We've covered a lot of ground. So now I'm going to give you a couple little cool tips to make your life easier and save you in the long run. Let's say you're doing techno music and they really have quite a rapid hi-hat thing going on and maybe you just can't play it. Let's use the arpeggiator on the hi-hat part to actually play the hi-hat for us. Check it out. Here's what I have. Here's my hi-hat sound. If I turn the arpeggiator on, and it happens to be on sequence B, when I hold them down, pretty cool, huh? So let's go ahead and record that. Turn off the arpeggiator and play it back. Instant techno hi-hats. Cool tip number 2 is, let's make our drums go in reverse by using the D beam. Check this out. Here's my pattern. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hand over the D beam, first set the D beam to key shift -S for selected part. Make sure your selected part is R for rhythm. Then go in and watch what happens. I'll do it by itself. Now when I play everything, only the drums will go in reverse. Cool tip number 3, mute swapping. I've got a pattern here that has parts 1, 3, and 4 muted and parts R, 2, and 5 playing. By holding down part mute and pressing part select repeatedly, it will swap the mute settings. Check it out. R, 2, and 5 are playing. Hold down part mute, press part select, and switch. And go back. Great for putting a song together. Cool tip number 4. If you don't have a smart media card, you can still back up and retrieve all of your user patterns and patches to an external sequencer using the bulk dump feature. It's real easy to do. Take a MIDI chord from MIDI out, go to MIDI in on your sequencer. Hold down Shift, press the dump button, which is number 16. Page over 2 times to all, so it says bulk, all, send. Put your sequencer into record mode, have it recording, and press enter. All of the information will get dumped out of the MIDI port into your sequencer. You can save it away on disk. When you want to play it back, all you have to do is connect the MIDI out from the sequencer to the MIDI in, hold down Shift, press the number 16 button again, and page all the way over to where it says bulk receive waiting. And then press play on the sequencer with that file in it, and it'll play right back in, go into the temporary buffer area, and then you can turn around and save all of the patches and the actual pattern to a user location. As you can see, the MC-505 is a very powerful piece of equipment. We hope that we've given you enough additional information so you can get the most out of your Groovebox. I'm Tonee McGuire, and enjoy yourself.